It's really nice to meet you all. So like I said, it is the first cross-government strategy for 15 years. And from that, we essentially developed the outcomes and the ambitions for the strategy. So again, you can see the report on the gov.uk website. We've also published the data tables of the survey, which captures all of the questions. And if you're sort of into data and analytics, you're able to kind of really break that down. We also, when we did the roadshows just recently with NYA, UK Youth and the regional youth work units, we published some of that data by region. So I can definitely get the one for the Southeast to share with you directly if that's helpful. Essentially, what we know from the state of the nation is lots of young people are spending lots of time on screens, lots of time at home, not engaging with sort of the outside world. We know that lots of young people don't feel safe in their local community. They don't feel safe online. They want to be engaging with their local community in terms of volunteering and that sense of belonging, but they don't necessarily know how, or they don't feel that the conditions are there for them to do that. So adults aren't welcoming into them spaces, etc. We also know the stats around the high numbers of neat young people, the high numbers of poor well-being. And so that's kind of the backdrop really to the strategy. So it's called Youth Matters. And it's really focused on making sure that every young person, no matter where they're from, should have a safe place to go, someone who cares for them, and a community they feel part of. So the vision for the strategy was co-created with young people, and young people also worked with us to kind of finalise kind of the main pillars of the strategy and the overall narrative, which is very much around hopeful, putting young people at the driving seat, big focus on youth engagement and decision making as well throughout it all. So there's three main pillars, which is people who care is the first one. So that's really about recognising that actually in order to achieve these outcomes, that young people, for young people, that the system that supports them needs to be strengthened and improved. So there's things in here around trusted adults. So that's broader than just the youth sector, but includes anyone who has that trusted adult role. We want to increase the number of young people who have access to a trusted adult. Supporting and improving the workforce. So this is particularly focused on youth sector workforce. So thinking about how we improve access to the youth work sector, improve career options, and how we raise the profile of youth work and how we strengthen the qualifications framework in the youth sector. It also focuses on friends and relationships, so that peer-to-peer relationship between young people, the online world. We actually, since we launched this, we've already seen DSIT launch the consultation around sort of young people's engagement with the online world, and we've been working with them very closely. They actually replicated our engagement work with young people and are now running that to sort of make sure young people's voices are at the heart of that potential social media ban consultation. So that's really positive. The second chapter is all about places to go and things to do for young people. So includes richer lives. So there's policies in here around increasing enriching activities for young people, increasing access to youth services, sports, arts, culture, dormant assets, things like enrichment, all of that kind of policy area is in here. Good work. So this is predominantly about the youth guarantee. And since we've seen the launch of the strategy, we've seen more investment into this space. Keeping young people safe. So our Young Futures Hubs programme, they are operational at the moment. There's 8 Young Futures Hubs that basically the aim of those is around supporting young people vulnerable to crime and poor mental health to have support from a range of organisations in a local area. And we'll be rolling out the Hubs programme over the next few years. It includes our capital programme and then policies on health and wellbeing. And then the final chapter is about sort of young people being seen and heard. So how we deliver with young people. So the strategy is committed to really making sure that young people don't just have a seat at the table, but they're actually really involved in decision making locally, regionally and nationally. So from a DCMS perspective, we're looking to continue support for the I Will movement, who are basically developing places and cities of social action across the UK. It includes identifying and doing test and learn on how young people can be really involved meaningfully in local decision making when it comes to funding. And there's other kind of actions in there around youth empowerment. And lastly, holding us to account. So we want young people to be able to say, as we go on this journey, actually, this has changed, or you said you were going to do this, but in my area, it looks like this, or like opportunities for basically young people to continue that engagement with us nationally. And we're just working with young people to figure out exactly what that looks like, but it will include some kind of annual hearing. Now, we don't just want that to be sort of like a select group of young people, but thinking about how we build on the engagement that we've done so far so that lots of diverse voices can feed into that. There's 3 shifts that we want to make. So it's not just about the outcomes and what we deliver, but how. So there's a big shift from national to local, fragmented to collaborative, and excluded to empowered. And then there's 2 clear ambitions that we want to have achieved over the next 10 years. It will be tracking to see sort of how we measure the progress of the strategy. And that's that we want to halve the participation gap in enriching activities between disadvantaged young people and their peers, and for 500,000 more young people to have access to a trusted adult outside their home. Slide. So this is just a bit of a roadmap that sets out our delivery. So the policies that you can currently see, that I've currently spoken about and that you can see on the gov.uk website are reflected on the basis of this current spending review, which is basically just started. So from April 26 until March 29. So the kind of what's in there at the moment sets out the first initial steps. And obviously this is a 10-year strategy, so we're not assuming that everything will be done in the next 3 years. And we've looked at how we need to prioritise that. So yeah, this just sets out a bit of a roadmap. We're currently developing the policies and programmes for the funding that we've got secured through the spending review. And you can expect to kind of hear more about that over the coming months. Alongside that, we'll be running the annual hearing and doing a delivery report sort of next year. And there's a few other milestones like 50 Young Futures hubs, which is a manifesto commitment. We want them to have been kind of established by the end of the spending review periods. And then obviously we've got our longer term ambitions. So on the next slide, this is just a few kind of updates. So I've mentioned some of these as we've been going along, but just so you can see how we've been kind of progressing since launching in December. So on the people who care, so for us, one of the main things was once the strategy launched, making sure that there's still really strong engagement with the sector, that people actually can use the strategy to think about what it means for their own organisations, their own local partnerships in the areas that they live, how they can use the data that we've sourced to kind of improve services. So we delivered the regional roadshows, and we've done lots of external engagement, a bit like this session, to make sure that people have the agency to use the strategy kind of for their own development as well. We're currently developing proposals for our Trusted Adult Support Programme. So thinking about what do we mean by trusted adult? What support do people need? How are they connected locally? Whether you're a youth worker, a volunteer, sports coach, etc. Like, what is that, and how do we make sure that there's kind of some minimum level of like training and support? We're also continuing to work with the regional youth work units on their infrastructure offer and the National Youth Agency in terms of the workforce offer as the professional body. So we're sort of finalising the plans for those as well. And in terms of places to go and things to do, on the capital side, we've got 350 million to refurbish up to 250 youth organisations, buildings and facilities. That includes equipment as well. So on that, and for example, at Richer Young Lives, which is our revenue programme, we're working through and doing some co-design on exactly what that should look like. How do we make those 3 shifts that we've talked about before? So you can expect to hear more about that over the coming months. Local Youth Transformation is the programme that we piloted last year, working with the NYA, lots of sector partners. And we worked with 12 local authorities to essentially do a review and look at how they could sort of improve their youth offer and through kind of building back their capacity and capability. So there's been some really positive findings from that pilot so far. And we've looked at how that links to kind of the Young Futures Hubs programme. And I'm pleased to say that the 8 early adopters are now operational. And I actually went to see the one that's being set up in Brighton last week. And there's some really interesting work, I think, that's going to be coming out of them in terms of how organisations are working together. Youth Voice is also a big part of that programme. as well, which is really positive. A couple of other things on here. So the enrichment expansion programme we announced that last summer, and that's just about to become operational. So that's 22.5 million, and we're working in partnership with the Department for Education to enable 400 schools to basically improve their enrichment offer. So thinking about how schools work together with local services, including youth services, to ensure young people have a good enrichment offer. So that's the tender for that programme is currently live. So we're looking for a delivery partner, and yeah, that's really positive. And then dormant assets is the kind of the money that government sort of holds, and there's a big focus on youth for that. So that's money that's reclaimed from dormant bank accounts. It's not government money as such, but we distribute it via we're going to be distributing it via the National Lottery Community Fund. And there's a big focus on enrichment for this programme as well. So we're working really closely with them to ensure it's designed like with the youth strategy in mind, and it's aligned to kind of the other funds that DCMS has. So lots of these things in co-design at the moment. On Be Seen and Heard, we've just delivered a bit like the youth sector roadshows, the Seen and Heard events, which were really positive. We've continued to ensure young people are involved in the co-design of the other programmes that I've mentioned through our youth advisory group, but through other mechanisms as well. We've recently published actually some guidance to support youth voice in policy making for local authorities and others. So again, the link to that is here. We're getting quite a lot of requests from other government departments on some of this work. And so it's great to kind of see so much emphasis and like enthusiasm for this, which is really good. And we're just about to finalise an internal sort of cross-government accountability process, which includes a shared outcomes framework, which we will publish externally, and we'll be encouraging all of the government departments to use it, so we're able to kind of track the impact of the strategy through the programmes that government delivers, which will be really positive and obviously is driving that cross-government work even more. To support that, we're kind of setting up an internal sort of portfolio board to sort of like govern the strategy as well. So that's really positive. We obviously encouraging external organisations to use it, but it is obviously quite a technical sort of evaluation like framework. But obviously it's there, it'll be there for people to like look at and use if it's helpful. I've mentioned other government departments, so it's very busy on this front, and it's really positive from my perspective, because I think this is the systems change that we need to see for young people. So a few of the things that we're doing at the moment are listed here, but so Treasury have launched a thematic review of cross-government youth spend, and that's currently started. So already thinking about the next spending review, thinking about like what government can do to really think about where all of the funds for young people sort of outside of statutory services is going. How do we make sure there's stronger links? So our team are heavily involved in that. I've mentioned the consultation on potential social media bans, so that's running until the end of May. And actually, Savanta, I Will, which is UK Youth and Volunteering Matters, running lots of workshops. So if you haven't seen those, definitely encourage you to get involved. And they're also keen to hear from youth workers as like professionals as well to get their perspectives. So I think that's running till the end of May, so not long to go. The Alan Milburn review consultation, obviously looking at the issues around Meet Young People, has just closed, and that's due to be published like very soon. And I think we're anticipating that will have a big impact on sort of like young people's the landscape for young people in terms of youth employability. So encourage you to keep an eye out for that. We're pleased to see the Department for Health Early Support Mental Health Hubs funding has been extended. We've obviously seen the DfE publish the school's white paper, and the SEND consultation has opened. And then finally in MHCLG, there was a local outcomes framework published, which now requires local authorities to report back on participation in terms of young people. So actually it's just another lever that we're trying to kind of drive through like local authorities. And lastly, we saw the Votes at 16 legislation debated in Parliament. So obviously that agenda is very big for us. And I'm sure Esther, who's on the call as well, and lots of you, and lots of work continuing to happen for that. I'll just like whiz through these. We've talked about the kind of 3 shifts, so I won't go into this much more, but you can just see a bit more there in terms of what the strategy is trying to do. But these are sort of, we're really trying to think differently about how like government delivers this agenda. So something that we're really keen to get your thoughts on. And I think that's pretty much it. Obviously, I mean, we're pretty much kind of coming to the end of the kind of initial stage of external engagement on the strategy. I think lots of people have been engaged and kind of probably know quite a lot about it. The events went really well, but there are kind of toolkits and things and lots of links at the end of these slides for you to just have a look at if you want to kind of dig into anything in more detail. And there's some key resources linked to some of the things I've mentioned here as well. So yeah, that's me. I'll hand back to you, Jodie, shall I? I think we're going to take some questions.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. And I feel like I've heard this presentation and been in spaces a number of times, and I learn something new each time because actually there's so much going on, which is really positive, that actually it doesn't always all sink in. So actually it is really great to have you here because even those that have heard this information before, it's kind of constantly thinking about what's our kind of role in this, what does this mean for Oxfordshire and our work, but also, just constantly kind of linking us in. And I think I feel very, very excited about this shift and the way that things have been moving nationally and locally. And I think one of the really great things about the strategy is not only that it exists to the first, as you say, in 15 years, but the way that it was conducted and pulled together was it took a very different approach to what we have seen previously. And when you were describing at the beginning about the whole kind of co-production piece, so the numbers of young people up and down the country, the numbers of the youth sector engagement in that, and you can really feel from the strategy that it's touched on so many things that are so relevant to all of us in our work and that we hear from young people all the time, that it feels like it's really authentically being created, and it's obviously got some really great promises and commitments in there as well. Also great to hear about some of the ways in which that's already happening. I mean, there's so much work happening in lots of ways, and I think those 3 principles at the end feel really important in terms of the approach that's being adopted all the way through that. So that piece around kind of national to local, the bit that's talked about from silo to collaboration, that might not have been the exact words, but that piece around the cross-sector working, that you're describing all those different departments is new effectively for all of those different departments in the government to be working together in different ways. It's also new in lots of the kind of local areas as well, for everyone to be really thinking much more together and that kind of cross-working, and that feels really important. It feels like it's the piece that's really is about the systems change, and it's the bit for me that feels that we will make a big difference, significant change kind of over the next few years because of those elements to that. Also, the points around the fact that it's about really reaching young people that don't access provision. It's got that kind of strand through it. And of course, the youth voice piece, which we are very passionate as well about for lots of reasons, but also because we can't really have these discussions and create changes for young people if young people are not in the driving seats around that as well. So with that, thank you, Kaylee. And I'm sure there are a number of questions that come through, but actually I'm going to go to Katie and Wyn to start with, and I'd just really like you to share your initial thoughts on the strategy. Actually, it should be really great. I know that you've read through the strategy and you've unpicked it in different ways, but also hearing it from Kaylee. Katie, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sorry about my voice. I'm a bit sick today, so I'll keep it brief. It's gives me a lot of hope that there is a youth strategy again, and that the government has taken the time to think about young people. A lot of previous governments haven't, so it's nice to see this work happening again. I'm also very pleased that the strategy is focusing on all of the young person, and that we want to live fulfilling lives. It's not just focusing on academic attainment in one area, it's focusing on all of us as people. Obviously, I'm just concerned about the implementation. Obviously, it's a very good strategy, but it will only be as good as its implementation, so we've got to make sure we do a good job with it.
Absolutely. I mean, you've kind of spoken like a true professional in that sense. I think, yeah, absolutely, Katie. I think that's right. And I think the passion that we're hearing from people locally as well, and making sure that we're all connected to that work and actually how that is implemented is just important. Over to you, Wyn. How do you feel about the strategy? Are there any particular things that
I think the theory is
highlight?
Good. I think the theory is a good start. Again, we'll see how it goes with the implementation. I am interested in provisions for vulnerable, for more minorities. Like, how well does this cover queer youth and neurodivergent youth who are things like high functioning, where you don't necessarily need like SEND, that kind of stuff. You can exist within the standard systems, but need some additional support. I'm curious about that. I'm curious about the barrier to entry to just access stuff. Yeah, I think it's broadly good. There's going to be places for improvement, but we'll see how it goes as it's implemented.
Yeah, no, thank you, Wyn. And I think there's some really important elements in there. I don't know, Kaylee, if you want to respond to that in terms of the reach for particularly young people or barriers that may be there, and what's the kind of consideration and thinking around that?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks so much both for your reflections. It's really good to meet you. Good to hear from you. Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, there's always room for improvement. I think for us, this has the aim of this was being like quite a broad sort of like strategy. It needs to kind of reach all young people. I guess we're thinking about our funding, which, it's quite over 3 years. It's a good amount, but it's not going to like reach every young person. So we're currently thinking about who are the young people that need access to these services the most. What are the current barriers to access? And like, our Secretary of State is really interested in not just what the stats say, but like what young people themselves are saying. So we'd really welcome like any further thoughts that you have on that. And also we're really interested in like how can we support like local areas to kind of draw in other funding or develop their services to sort of meet young people's needs like on a variety of levels. So yeah, I think it's a balance of like having something ambitious for all young people and then thinking about sort of like what specific services can like young people access like locally, and where can our funding be like best used. So yeah, but I really appreciated your comments. Thank you.
And Wyn, just to come back to you, and then maybe Katie, you answer this question as well. What do you think is the most important aspect of this work that will really matter to young people?
What is the most? I mean, being heard, like the not having our lives chosen for us, which I think, I don't know exactly, but I think Katie would agree with me on this, that that happens an awful lot. We get talked down to, we get our choices made for us an awful lot. And if this helps to remedy that, I think it's good.
Yeah.
Whether it goes far enough, we'll see. But I think it's a good start. It's certainly good that we finally have anything at all.
Thank you, Wyn. And Katie, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I agree with Wyn, just having some power back over our lives, and also a choice now. There should be a range of options for how we want to fulfill our lives. We shouldn't just be sent down one path, and I'm hoping the strategy will give us the choice for how we want to live our lives.
Amazing. Thank you both. It's just really great to get kind of initial take, and also I can hear some hope and optimism and also some skepticism as well, which I think is completely natural in terms of the amount of work that we've really got to do to be kind of really realizing the potential of this for young people. And I think some of the words that you've been using there around choice, things not being done to, about power and kind of how that's used, feel really important. And so thank you both for kind of bringing some of that thinking to this discussion. I believe we've got quite a few questions that have come through. So David, do you want to read out one of the questions that have come out?
I think we'll start at the beginning. Just specifically thinking about the young people who aren't often heard, and thinking about how young people who are experiencing parental imprisonment are included or thought about in this strategy is one point. And then I think we can probably add that into another question about communities like the county of Oxfordshire, which doesn't often get access to funding due to having not particularly high indices of deprivation. What is it that we need to do to make the case for this sort of funding in this area?
Kaylee, are you happy to respond?
Yeah. Yes. So like I said, we're still working through sort of like how where we will place our funding in terms of like geography. And like I said, some of that will be kind of using our like place strategy, looking at areas of deprivation. But like I said before, like our Secretary of State is also really interested in like what young people are saying, what is or isn't on offer in their local area, and if they are accessing services. So I would say kind of any evidence that you have on that from a young person's perspective, especially young people who aren't currently kind of accessing services regularly, then like that's something like really useful, I think, for us to be aware of. Obviously, any updates that we have on like when our funding becomes available and that approach we'll share with you. But I think it's also not just about like the national like government funding, but also then like what can you do to galvanize locally? How can DCMS support with any of those conversations? Like what's the role of local authority? Like what other funders are involved? Like again, like our Secretary of State is very interested in how other funders come to the table to like match our like the national investment in this. But I also think hopefully that will drive that ambition locally as well. We're kind of working with other national funders to think about how their funding also kind of aligns to this. So there's just something about how can you help to start those conversations locally as well as like the fact that these are happening nationally, sort of like to meet those ambitions. I think
That's
that was the
really helpful,
second question. If you could
Kaylee.
remind me the first one, because I just went on a tangent about funding.
Just before you do that, David, I was just thinking, Kaylee, that's an interesting point around actually how we take some of the data and knowledge that we have from young people and from what we kind of understand about Oxfordshire and feed that in. Is that
Yeah.
something, because there are a number of significant pieces of work that have happened in Oxfordshire that gives us some quite good insight into that. Would we send that over to you? Or
Yeah,
where would
please feel
that go?
free.
Yeah, because actually
Yeah,
that's
please feel free.
that I've kind of just heard that as a bit of an invite for information. So I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that could definitely
definitely.
be something that we could send over. And so I guess if there are other people on this call that have particular insights and things that they want to kind of feed into that, then actually we can kind of draw that together and then send that over.
Yeah.
I think that would be great. Okay, thank you. Sorry, over to you, David.
The other part of that was about how young people children who are impacted by parental imprisonment have been considered as an often unheard group.
Yeah, so the team actually have done some work, did some work as part of the engagement, and we're part of a roundtable last year and engaged with like young people directly. I can't remember the name of the organisation, but there was some work that DFE were doing on this as well. So we did capture, but I mean, again, I'm not trying to say that like we spoke to every young person who's impacted by this, but there was definitely some engagement with this group of young people last year. But of course, from our perspective, we want to have like that ongoing engagement. So, we're just currently thinking, what does our youth engagement programs like look like as part of the strategy? So any work or links like into that you think DCMS should be involved in. Also, like obviously Esther's here through like the youth council and that kind of thing, making sure that sort of those young people are represented sort of in those platforms. Yeah, something I'm like really passionate about. So like do make sure. And if you think that we're not, there's groups of young people who aren't represented in just the wider work that DCMS is doing, then do feel free to kind of like let us know and like make recommendations about who we should be speaking to.
Amazing, thank you, David. You've got access to the questions, so you
Yeah.
keep
No, I've got there's some really good. No, there's some really good ones. So the next one will be what are there any protections for this work in the case of an election or a change in government over the 10-year period of the strategy, and what is that kind of protection look like? And then connected to that, the funding is for 3 years. Is there already been thinking about what will happen at the end of that 3 years?
Yeah, all really good questions. So ultimately, no, like we can't guarantee anything like as a result of a change of election, like, but this does set out like a long-term strategy, and there is a lot of cross-government support, and I think locally there's a lot of sort of like cross-party support, if you like, from like the local authorities that we're working with. So I think for us, there isn't much that can be put in place to ensure that like any specific program would continue. But obviously with the more that we have the evidence, the more that we kind of set out like a clear direction, like the less likely that that will happen. Also, I think it's about ensuring that locally people can take this to kind of develop their own strategies, regardless of who is in power locally. So we've seen quite a lot of local areas develop their own youth strategies off the back of this over the last few months. And that's another really good way of kind of making sure that at least at a local level, kind of the needs of young people kind of remain to be at the heart. We've set out our funding for the next 3 years. The next spending review will come around quick, and actually we're already starting to think about, okay, off the back of like what we know from the engagement we did last year, what evidence do we need to start collecting now to put forward a really strong case to Treasury in the next spending review, including things like increased revenue, longer term funding, access to youth services. So that work is already taking place. So I'll just encourage everyone to continue to support any calls that we have for like evidence, like keep collecting the evidence, continue to show us like how the impact of this work is having and your own work is having on young people, because we basically use all of that to kind of put forward the strongest business case possible. Obviously the world is changing rapidly, and even since we launched this, like different things are coming up for young people, and so that will continue to evolve. But essentially from our perspective, it's like how youth work responds to that, and that's the kind of thing that we will be like looking to really showcase.
The next question is about workforce development and the commitment about workforce development in the context of the changes and the work being done around the qualifications and youth work the frameworks for qualifications. Just a question about how this strategy will influence additional funding for more and wider reach of youth work training.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've set up 15 million overall for our work in the kind of people who care section, which includes support for youth work qualifications, like through the NYA, additional like funds for like a wider trusted adult support program, 5 million for like infrastructure support, and looking at actually what the needs of the system that supports all of these people over the next few years. So we're just working through what exactly that looks like. Again, like we hope there's a lot of interest in like the role of youth workers and the role of trusted adults more broadly. And actually, I think one of the hopes is like our funding can draw in more investment into these spaces. And again, because the strategy is set out, like actually in order to deliver this other stuff for young people, it needs really good people to deliver it. So I think that we've set out obviously our initial investment, but we're hoping that through our ambitions, like more will become available, either that's through other funds or sort of like locally as well. Obviously there is an NYA have set out the kind of review of the qualifications framework and are implementing that, and obviously we're working with them through our funding to sort of like make sure that that's reaches as many people as possible. The strategy also sets out increasing the number of people accessing things like apprenticeships. So again, that will be through the support of the NYA.
Brilliant. There's probably just two more things, Jodie. Is that all right? We've got time for just two more. One of them is about the work around youth voice and listening to young people who struggle to make themselves heard, particularly around those who don't. The language here is around non-verbal, pre-verbal. Young people in systems that are not designed to listen to them, like the family court system. What's the work that can be done around how we train and support the adults around them, teachers, school-based staff, court staff, and able to make sure that they're really truly listened to?
That's a really, really good question. I think for us there's a few things. So firstly, like setting out that like actually everyone should be doing like this work and thinking about like different ways to involve young people, like through a national strategy, like sets a bit of a precedence that obviously publishing the guidance, like in our own programs, young people are going to be involved in like decisions around funding, whether that's grant panels, identifying priorities. So there's something about like DCMS, like showing that and encouraging other government departments to do it. Obviously these things don't just happen overnight, and we know there are really good areas of good practice, so looking at how we showcase those. I think there's something about then the organisations who do this already really well, like encouraging others to do it and showing how that can work for like different groups of young people. And also there's just showing that it's not just like around youth advisory groups, or it's not just around survey. Like there's so many different ways, and there should be like multitudes of ways that young people can get involved. And how we're using all of that information combined to kind of like change the system is really important. I'm not saying that that's easy. And sometimes that's on a really individual, like one-to-one basis, like the examples you were just giving. So there's something about how we continue to kind of show where positive things have happened, and it like try and encourage others to do it in that way. And I think, again, if people have got good examples of where that's happening locally with specific groups of young people who might not engage in traditional ways, or on things, like I said before, how young people are influencing like funding decisions, like we're really keen to hear about that, so we can also have a role in like showcasing that to others as well.
Brilliant. And then the last one we'll do is raising the topic of AI and that kind of innovative space. What's the work that your team are doing around thinking collaboratively with young people about the impact of AI on them and how they're heard and making themselves heard, and any opportunities to contribute to that kind of thinking?
Yeah, that's really interesting. So that's not something our team kind of lead on specifically. I guess that is also part of the a conversation that's happening with the DSIT consultation, because it's not just about social media, it's about how young people interact online and in the digital space. So they're kind of really leading on that. And actually, it's great to have youth organisations leading on that consultation with young people, like I said before. However, we do recognise that obviously AI like has a massive impact in terms of like how young people are actually using AI to get support from in terms of advice traditionally that might be from like a youth worker or advice worker, for example. So we are interested in exploring that further, but it's not something we're like actively doing focus groups on. But obviously we're aware of like the huge impact, and something that we should really probably think about, like how do we think about it more in terms of our engagement. So yeah, thanks so much for raising the question.
Is that the last one, David? Amazing. Thank you, Kaylee. And I was just thinking, because there's a lot there. There's a lot happening in lots of different ways. And I'm thinking, you know, I know naturally people that are working in Oxfordshire will be thinking about, what does this mean for Oxfordshire? How do I access this? What does that look like? So I was just kind of making some notes around that. So I think some of the things that you were describing, so there's an enrichment fund that will come out through National Lottery. So that will be one route that people can access funding through for the enrichment funds and activities that will be coming out through that. The piece around workforce development and accessing qualifications obviously is all being strengthened through National Youth Agency, but then it will also come through the local delivery partners. Obviously, Oxfordshire Youth is one of those, and any other kind of delivery partners of the qualifications locally as well. So that will be where people can access those. Oxfordshire is also one of the areas that has accessed the Youth Transformation Pilot. And so there is work that's then happening in Oxfordshire and all of the different districts.
We had decided we weren't going to carry on with the hub in this financial year.
There's some noise come on in the background. If we could mute that, that would be great. And so also that some of you are describing about what does that look like locally in terms of strategy. And actually Oxfordshire County Council are actually holding that Youth Transformation Pilot and will be looking to come out to partners to create a youth offer strategy. And also on this call in a bit, we'll be talking about a youth voice strategy for Oxfordshire as well. But there's some incredible work happening in Oxfordshire in lots of ways. And there are a number of things that you're describing already happening locally as well. Is there anything else that I'm kind of missing in terms of kind of, you know, how some of those things filter down from what I was describing there that you can kind of add to that, Kaylee?
I think you've summarized it really well, so thank you. I would just say like there's a really, really big focus on young people like across government, and so the main way to keep in touch with any of DCMS funds is like through our newsletter. So I think the link of that is in the slides. I just encourage everyone, because any kind of announcements around that will be through there, and engagement opportunities on code design and things like that. But obviously in our newsletter we're trying to kind of under the pillars also include anything from other government departments that's relevant. But I would just say like there is a focus on like other government areas, so whether that's employment through DWP, obviously safety through like Home Office, obviously DFE, things like holiday activity fund, enrichment, all of that kind of stuff. So definitely we're trying to make sure that we sort of synthesize that a bit, but it's just to know that there is a big focus, which is obviously really positive. So if you are working in a more of a specialist environment, then definitely kind of make sure that you're looped in to some of the other things as well.